and welcome to a new video for this week. And I was just about to start a review, and then a few channel members said oi, because we've reached that developing mature stage in our relationship. We've reached the oi stage. Oi, they said, what about vinyl? And I thought, what, vinyl reviews and things? And they said yes. And I said, well, I just did one of those videos the other day. And they said, oh no, it's been 15 or 16 videos ago you've touched vinyl reviews and vinyl news and all of that, Pavlova. And I thought, blimey, they've got a point. So it's about time. I'll do a review next week, I promise. But this time we're going to look at a mixture of vinyl reviews and vinyl news. But even the vinyl news, I'll have a bit of opinion thrown in just for good measure, as is my wont. Now, if you are a Patreon member, then you'll see a director's cut, and there will be a few more vinyl bits and pieces stuck on the end, maybe a dozen or so extra. So if you want to see those extra pieces of vinyl talked about, dissected and discussed, then nip down into the description. There's a link to my Patreon page and you can check it out in there. To begin with, we've got the boy, the mole, the fox and the horse. Is that right? It's a bit of a mouthful, hey? Anyway, it sits in a gatefold sleeve, and well, it's not really a music album at all. Well, it is, but it isn't. It's the new album by writer-illustrator Charlie Moketsi via Penguin, the book publisher. Actually, it's a sort of audio book, I suppose, and with some soundtrack goodies going off in the background by one Max Richter, and that accompanies a new composition via Isabel Waller-Bridge. It also features some rather delightful naturalistic sounds of nature because, well, this album was recorded live, as it were, in a barn, and it all adds flavour. The actual story is it's a children's story, but it's one of those, you know, children's stories for all ages. It's a very nice tale indeed, and it's rather sweet. Next up is Miles Davis via Rhino, and this one is called Merci Miles, and it's a double album, not set in a gatefold this time, but in a single sleeve. This one was recorded at the Jazz et Vian Festival, France, on the 1st of July 1991. It includes tracks such as Penetration and Jailbait, written by Prince. There's lots of varied tempos here, and they swing between the jazz funk and jazz rock idioms, and it's a nice selection. Miles packs in a host of vibes here. Next we have a trio of releases from the Audiophile Spanish label Munster. First up sees the release of a Venezuelan rocker. The Love Depression comes from 1968. What you've got here are lots of fuzz guitars combined with aggressive garage rock. Next up, 60s Peruvian rock, Los Teddies, and I won't attempt to pronounce this one, but there's the title. Mixes Stones and Doors covers with originals covered in blues rhythms. This one is rather atmospheric with some fine guitar work. Next up, something else I can't pronounce, so here are the artists. This one is a 1972 release, and it's a fascinating combination of often delicate acoustic guitar and free-form percussion. let's take a break from all those newsy bits and do a full review. This one is Feel Flows. It's a compilation of sorts from the Beach Boys. Now I have the double album version here. This one is via Capitol, and well, it's one of those releases that wallows in the minutiae and has a ball doing so. There's also a CD version, a 2 CD version set, I hasten to add, and there's also a 135 track 5 CD box set, and in addition to that, as we're on a vinyl thing here, there's also a 4 LP version. So this particular album comes in all sorts of formats. The collection is subtitled The Sunflower and Surfs Up Sessions 1969 to 1971, and it basically features unreleased tracks, live recordings, radio promos, alternative versions, alternative mixes, isolated backing tracks and a cappella versions taken from the album sessions themselves. So why now? Why are these editions here at all? Well, this is the 50th anniversary of these albums, and I'm personally happy to see them. Now, there's a tedious undercurrent surrounding a lot of Beach Boys material, stating that post Pet Sounds, the rest don't matter, as if the quality fell off a cliff and was nothing more than ephemera. Yes, the band had to move to a different creative path, away from Brian Wilson's meticulous, almost OCD music making mythology, but the public's Brian fixation unfairly damages and blurs out the talent that surrounded him, I feel, as if the Beach Boys were a Brian solo project only backed by session men. There was more to the Beach Boys than Brian Wilson. Of course, Brian Wilson was critical. Brian Wilson was an amazing songwriter, even when he was back home being a producer and a songwriter and wasn't visible with the group. Of course, he was an incredibly important part of the Beach Boys, but I would emphasize that aspect. He was part of a larger group. So, for example, I value Bruce Johnston's creative contribution on these albums. Just as one example, I felt he reinvigorated the group when he joined. Instead of, I don't know, a slight tendency to do a bit of navel gazing and wandering around aimlessly, I felt he gave the group a sense of direction when he joined. Whatever edition you do go for, and I would highly recommend the 4 vinyl LP version or the 5 CD version, if you are going to go for this at all, to my mind, if you're going to do it properly and get the whole kit and caboodle. And this is a superb insight into the creative process. In terms of mastering, well, the mastering quality does vary. This is essentially a compilation, so no surprise there. But with this particular release, well, content is king, in that we should be glad this stuff is even here. We should be glad this stuff even exists. Speaking of rarities and working versions and demos and all that kind of in the studio malarkey, well, we have a similar product here from Marc Bolan. This is Star King, and it was previously a Record Store Day release. Again, this is a compilation of, well, bits and pieces, basically. It's a single disc LP in a simple sleeve, and it arrives with a subtitle, a collection of working and master versions and mixes. And as I say, it was published as a limited edition for Record Store Day in 2021. The LP features 10 rarities, including demos, working versions, alternatives, and the like. They range from 1972 to 1976, and they're ideal for people, well, who just like to look under the bonnet and just see how these things were produced and how these things evolved in the studio, how they developed, where they came from, how they were added to and changed over time. That is, it's a useful collection to examine the artistic process itself. Here we see songs under construction, there's no chrome finish here. This is a snapshot, a collection of unfinished rough diamonds. Now, the majority of these tracks have been released before on other compilations, but it's nice to see them all collected here on this vinyl disc. Again, in terms of mastering, well, firstly, this is a compilation, so the mastering does vary to decent and okay and pretty good and amazing. But again, content is once again king, and I'm just happy not only that they are out there as a sort of bootleg MP3, that's what I would normally expect to see, but that they are out there on vinyl. The next track is enigmatic. It is from a band, a group, an individual called CA. Strictly speaking, it's by England's Council of Legislation and the governing body of hyper-real simulations and constructs. Yeah, this single disc LP features medieval speedcore, esoteric grime, and horse riding ambient. Oh yeah. Basically, this is a collation of CA's singles and EPs from 2020. It combines chaos, melodicism, and spectacle. Listening to this album is a bit like watching a million dandelion seeds blowing in the wind. Next, we're looking at Rod. That's right, Rod Stewart in a big box set. And this one looks at Rod, the pop star, Rod post-Atlantic Crossing. Well, I say post, this box set features Atlantic Crossing as well, including A Night on the Town, Footloose and Fancy Free, Blondes Have More Fun, and Encores. So basically, Warner-related material from 1975 to 1978. The rarities, I should add, Encores is the name of that. Well, that features the football team Celtic. It features their own shirt colours. Staring hornets' nests? Rod? Nah. The next album is a jazz release from Florian Arbenz. He's a jazz drummer and he works on this album with American trumpeter Herman Mahari and the Brazilian guitarist Nelson Veras on the avant-leaning Conversation No. 1. This particular album has a nice blend of melodicism with more avant-garde structures, I think. Now we have a trio of releases from the UK audiophile record label Demon, and we begin with the alt-pop band Drugstore and the album Songs for the Jet Set from 2001. Alt? Well, I say alt because of the breathy, rather textured voice of Isabel Montero. She always sounded like a passerby singing in microphone range. I always felt she sounded other from the group, you might say. Also look out for Shawaddywaddy's Rock and Roll Jukebox, no less, a new compilation on pink vinyl and stuffed with hits. And finally, watch out for a re-release from Jimmy Castor. Jimmy Castor's Story, no less, from 1972. Castor was an R&B singer and he had this lovely way of belting out a song, but kind of doing it in a soothing manner. Also from Demon, but I wanted to separate these into a category all of their own, I suppose. We have the sort of anti-pop of Audioweb. Well, more of an anti-Brit pop, I would say. This is a Manchester-based house dub reggae band, ploughed their own mid-90s furrow. So we have the band's 1996 debut album, their self-titled album. This one's on white vinyl. And we have Firework City from 1998. This one brings in a little bit of Massive Attack type vibes, I would say. Very much a crossover album. Another review now, and a pizza box type box set from the Bluetones, and this one is called Expecting to Fly. This one is also from Demon. Demon have been rather busy of late, and well, I have to say I was rather surprised to see this box set at all. Surprised in a nice way, of course. I'm not being derogatory in any way. This is still, it's quite a lavish collection for the band. I couch this introduction with a certain amount of surprise, I suppose, because, well, I feel the band had never really received the kudos that some of their contemporaries received, and were never really lauded in the same way. I'm talking about bands like the Stone Roses or Blur or even Oasis at that time anyway. The Bluetones always seemed to be a Brit pop outfit over on the periphery because, well, maybe it's because they were late arrivals. They had a certain Me Too aspect because they were not there in the thick of it in the early 90s. Some thought them as second division material, wannabes, never wills. Also because they tended to make their splash when Britpop was on the wane, and they were sort of lumbered with a negative kickback by the press almost because of that. In a way, the increasingly stale aspect of Britpop as the 90s headed towards the end of the decade, well, all of that negativity was shoveled into a bucket and poured over the heads of the Bluetones, which is, of course, tremendously unfair. For me, the band's slight return single found on this album was as an iconic of the mid-90s as anything else on the scene at the time, while Blue Tonic is a notable and rather catchy song of the era, a real earworm. That particular song, once in the mind, it refuses to leave. So it's nice to see the band and this album receive the attention I think it deserves over 3 slabs of vinyl and in a pizza style box. That means you get the original album, a second disc featuring the singles alongside B-sides. Always a welcome addition, that, and too often ignored by labels. Plus you get a third disc called, and I quote, The Early Garage Years. The disc features demos and early EP tracks, plus homemade recordings. And I've got to say, this is a superb collection for the fans. It arrives with a large format photo booklet, and sure, the mastering is a little bit dry, maybe lacking a little bit of clarity, I would say, but it does offer a wide soundstage, low noise and good detail. Another review, and this time from Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark, and we have 2 releases from a strange period in the band's existence. These are Liberator and Universal. This is a time when co-founder Andy McCluskey was on his lonesome because everyone else had jumped ship and the music veered away from the Kraftwerk early influence and more towards the Pet Shop Boys. Dance pop was a core connect, a means to an end. Money, in other words. This music sold and produced chart material and worked a treat initially. Top 10 hits like Sailing on the Seven Seas and Pandora's Box would appear on Sugar Tax 1991, which appeared just before Liberator, one of the albums we're talking about here, from 1993, and Universal from 1996. By then, the top 10 singles had given away 2 singles in the top 30 and the top 50. This album, Liberator, well, this is OMD controlled by the market, OMD controlled by fashion and fad. This is OMD swamped by bad dance rhythms and techno light. Frankly, most of these songs could have been sung better by Kylie Minogue. To prove my point, McCluskey himself would soon drop OMD and would write songs for teen groups like Atomic Kitten. So then followed Universal, and having come a cropper with Pet Shop Boys Mark II on Liberator, with Universal, Andy McCluskey decided to go Tears for Fears Mark II, and that didn't work either. Now, McCluskey tried, bless him, he really had a go, but you could tell he never really had his heart in it. It sounded stale. It sounded like a retread. And I say all of this as a fan of the group, would you believe? After this album, the group, such as it was, deservedly died a death, at least in a temporary form. McCluskey himself stepped out of the hamster wheel and decided to take a break and refresh his creativity. Something he should have done 10 years previously, I think. There would be a happy ending to all of this when McCluskey and co-founder Paul Humphreys kissed and made up in 2010 and began to make real music all over again. Now, despite me absolutely slating these albums, they do serve a purpose. They actually are part of the band's evolution, and for fans, they are critical in telling a story. And so, I heartily recommend them to do that, to be part of that band narrative. Band narratives, artistic narratives, doesn't matter who they are, solo bands, male, female singers, whoever, orchestras, doesn't matter. You take the good, you take the bad, you see the whole picture, you see the evolution of an artist's creativity, their ups and their downs. So, the bad albums, to me, are just as important as the great albums. And both of these releases deserve a place in the OMD pantheon. On 10 West Scalpers labels, we have Mr. Williamz with Sound Killer Mindset. So Mr. Williamz presents his new LP with a reggae state of mind, but with hip-hop flavours on the periphery and plenty of clever rhyming. I'll give you a Bandcamp link for this one in the description. This is from Sedibus and it's called The Heavens, and it's a 4-tracker. And it's for anyone who has an interest in the Orb. It's sort of the Orb Redux in that it features Mr. Orb himself, Alex Patterson, and Andy Falconer. Remember him? He was part of the Orb from 1991 to 1994. And you know what? It sounds completely beautiful. There's dub, there's electronica, there's ambient samples, there's a coloured inner and green vinyl. So what more do you want? We are the Busybodies label, a strange name for a label, but there you are. This is the Eboni Band's self-titled album. This one's from 1981 and it mixes musicians from the Ivory Coast and, of all places, Motown. Yes, actually, there are people here who are ex-Motown label talent and they combine music cultures here. The music within offers 70s era funk, some pastoral musings, and rather joyous contemplation. Next up we have Brain Damage meets Big Youth, a new collaboration between the French dubsters Brain Damage, or Samuel Clayton Jr. and Martin Nathan, and the Kingston, Jamaica DJ Big Youth. A tragic tale actually, because the French dubsters flew over to Kingston, Jamaica. Clayton caught COVID and I'm afraid sadly died over there. He actually passed away, which was a bit of a shocker. Just a young man, something you don't really expect to read in a press release when you're just receiving a new LP. It's supposed to be a joyous occasion, but it had that element of sadness, obviously, with the release. So as a testament to Samuel Clayton Jr., we have this musical release which mixes jazz and blues tones that hang in the air like tuneful clouds. It's a lovely work, but one obviously threaded by tragedy. Next up we have a compilation called The Problem with Leisure, and this is a compilation covering Gang of Four songs. An interesting concept. So basically we have lots of guests singing the songs from the Gang of Four, and it's a right old mix. We've got Killing Joke, we've got Gary Newman, we even have the Dandy Warhols, Helmet and more. And there's plenty of interesting variation and interpretation for the Gang of Four songs. It's definitely a fascinating compilation. There's no shovelware on this piece, only life. And next we have George Jones with his Crew Cut, and this is from the German audiophile label Bear Family, obviously on a 10-inch LP. It's called Country Music Jamboree and it's limited to 500 copies, and you can only get it from the Bear Family website itself. I'll put a link in the description for you. The original version was originally released in Japan under the Mercury label back in 1960. Now the original release had 8 tracks and there's an extra 4 bonus tracks on this reissue. Now this is one more in Bear Family's ongoing limited edition 10-inch releases, and it's a cracking series of releases. So keep it going, guys, keep it going. Another one on We Are Busybodies, and we have a jazz outing for you called Blue Stompin', energetic and animated jazz from 1959 via saxman Hal Singer and Kippie Moketsi. The album packs in a rather swinging party affair onto a single disc on which the guys skip and gamble and squeeze in a heap of quality solos. Classic stuff indeed. And that's it, folks. That's it for this, I don't know, standard edition. If you want to see the director's cut and a few more vinyl LPs in there, then check out the Patreon version, the extended Patreon version. For now though, that's it. Thank you very much for sticking with me to the end of the video, and thank you very much for your support. If I could ask you just to click on the like and subscribe button below, really helps this channel to move forward, because you know, all that algorithm thing that YouTube just loves to bits. The description will have a few more links relating to the vinyl I've just talked about, in case you would like to check out the releases themselves. And there's more links in there, my social media links, the Facebook group I also run, which you're welcome to join, and my website, which has lots more editorial you don't see on this channel. I'll be back with a new video next week. It's going to be a review. It should be a review. It will be a review. Don't you worry, it'll be a review. I'll be back next week anyway, and I hope to see you, hope to have your company then. So, until that time, bye-bye for now.